There you go.
Okay, cool. And see, I'm pretty sure you said you were going to turn all this stuff off. I gave her a hard time earlier because we were her Outlook stuff kept trying to reboot.
You need to turn on the.
How do I use this device?
For this one?
It thinks it's a keyboard.
Ah.
It's shift. Shift is recognized.
Shift?
The button next to shift.
Keyboard assistant.
It's okay. It's just your nature. Does it work?
All right, you can. Are you getting volume?
I'm getting volume, but can you share your screen in Hangouts?
Again, probably, because we already were.
So it happens when you exit out.
You walked away, logged in. You're lucky that's all that happened. Yeah, can you send an invite? Or
I'm still in the session.
is she?
I don't know how you guys did this before.
You are in this video call.
Yeah.
Let's make this big.
3 people try to hang out.
To use the tool that you're forcing everyone to use. Absolutely, I agree. I'm closing that.
You know what? I'm gonna stop the screen share because I.
Oh, no, I just got in.
Oh, no.
All right, I'm now hanging up. Yeah, send me another text or something. This is awesome.
Can you call us on Google?
I love this technology.
We've never had this much problem.
We've never had this problem. It must be you.
You're part of the problem. We're about to talk about this.
Yeah, right.
Everyone, I should undo my presentation so everyone can see. So are you here?
This is all being recorded.
All right, so now, all right. Are you accepting?
I am. I'm in.
All right, share screen. Our entire screen. Can you see?
Awesome. Works. Solved it.
Only 15 minutes later. All right, guys, this is a little bit of a tangent topic to maybe some of the stuff that you guys talk about a lot. We're talking about not only kind of maybe very, very, very front end, but the actual app ecosystem that supports a lot of your front end work, right? And so what we're really talking about here is when you have to work with other people, how to make sure that you have lots of information, you're measuring all of your metrics, and able to share your state and your status with everyone else around you and vice versa, right? Do you want to hit the, we're gonna have to signal you or something. All right. Marlena's a new rock star who just joined our team. She came from Ohio. She's got about 2 years of app dev work. She's been killing it. Lots of DevOps stuff in her background. Lots of mobile, and actually DevOps for mobile, which is kind of cool. It's a little bit of a different genre, right? I was talking to some of the people in the audience about how DevOps is actually a big kind of an umbrella, and you can actually apply the principles to a couple different spaces, and we'll talk about that in a second. You can read all this stuff up here. I've been doing lots of Kubernetes, lots of containers, lots of automation, cloud, that type of stuff. Basically been in the industry for a while. What I kind of want to, yeah, please.
When was that picture taken?
When I had a haircut. It's terrible. That's probably about 3 years ago. How long ago did you think it was?
10.
That's an interesting question. We were told to ask our recruiting team when we're going to start getting more headshot photographers coming in, which would be kind of cool. I probably just didn't read it. Cool. Actually, go back one more. So one of the things that we're doing right here in Solemn right now is building up kind of this idea of a tooling capability, right? We start off with DevOps. The problem with DevOps is that it actually means so many different things that it's starting to almost mean nothing, right? So what we want to actually start saying is, hey, there's lots of technologies that you would use to enable kind of a developer or enable a data scientist or your technologist in general, right? But it's about how do we pick, what the right type of tooling is, whether they're build tools, whether they're platform tools like container orchestration or public cloud or data center, and how do we think about using them in the right way? So it's all the process and all of that continuous improvement type of stuff that really takes something that seems really, really simple and takes it to the next level, right? Getting into like self-healing, getting into HipChat, and chat ops so that you have access and visibility into everything that's going on in your platform from an application perspective all the time, right? And we are hiring, and we're going to have a link at the end. OK, cool. So this is primarily our focus and agenda today. Death by PowerPoint, right? But the idea is really we're just going to talk about the background and history of kind of some of the problems that we're trying to address, some of the solutions that we think might be valuable, dig into some of the code, and then we're actually going to demo. So we didn't want to go too deep or too broad. We want to leave some space for questions. We do have some stuff in the appendix if we want to go deeper. But this is just an idea, is that it feels like there is a lot of changes going on in the ecosystem around kind of application development, and how do we think about all the tangential stuff. One of the examples that I've given before is my kids recently learned to roller skate, and getting them up on skates wasn't too bad. Learning how to start, then they were really excited, like I can move. But that didn't actually help them stop or turn. And so learning how to figure out what to do when things break or when you need to change things is kind of a big deal, right? And so that's the kind of analogy that I'm making towards going really fast, but having all the tools in place so that you can do it. Sorry, you were right. In the beginning, web dev was really easy. I told Marlena, I think one of you guys made one of these. Apparently, if you go out on the internet right now today and you want to learn information about dry ice, you can go to dryice.com. dryiceinfo.com, and you'll get that specific web page, which is probably linked to a bunch of flat HTML files that do absolutely nothing else than serve flat HTML, right? The web's leading source for Dry Ice Info. I didn't go to any old Dry Ice Info web page. I went to the leading source. Thank you, Marlene. We also had a guy promoting his band. It wasn't quite this digitized before we loaded it in, but it represents the general premise that we had really bad, ugly websites for a really long time. And apparently there actually is, I don't know if you can read this, an old calculator web museum. Not just a museum for old calculators, but a museum for old calculators on the web. And if you want to go there, it's up today.
So what is he saying? A lot of these are static HTML compared with?
Stinking everything we have today, right? You know, whether it's Amazon.com, right? So Amazon.com, you have cart, right? So you have to put things into your cart, checkout, you have inventory issues, you have authentication, right? And apparently, because we were just having fun, you can actually order housekeeping to your home through Amazon.com. Don't know how it works, but it sounds exciting, right? What's that? You should try it. I'm married. We have a nice house. You're a single guy about to go into the woodlands. You've tried it?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, that sounds cool.
They just find someone local in your area and just like say, oh, yeah.
It's like Angie's List or something, right?
If you just hire us directly, we'll take like $20 off the price. Like, okay.
But balancing all those backend services, right? So that when you have a web page, you don't get a bunch of 404s on all this different content saying, hey, we can't service it, right? Even Facebook has like a ton of stuff. I'm going to forget it. OK, so if you go into your profile pic, apparently on Facebook, on anyone's profile, like one of your friends or something like that, you can actually go out and figure out how to pronounce their name. Don't know why that matters, but if you have a Chinese friend and their name's in Chinese, it'll pronounce it for you, for whatever. Have you tried it?
Yeah, my last name has no vowels. It's Angie.
This is amazing because these are two like super obscure random things, and I already have 2 examples of people who've tried it, which is awesome. I actually thought O365 was kind of an example as well. Microsoft is we think of as a really kind of old aging platform. I'm comfortable if everyone says it still is. But if you had to support and maintain the Microsoft O365 website, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of different websites. They're actually doing collaboration within most of their tools now. They have SharePoint integration. They have OneDrive integration. I would not want to be responsible for that without really rethinking how we think about health within the system of an app framework. Where am I at on time? Am I like going through 15 slides at a time? OK, cool.
It's been almost 9 minutes.
So why did we pull up this slide when I'm standing right next to it and I literally can't read anything on it? It is not just for principle. We actually went and looked up, we said Node.js microservices architecture. First hit, if you have your laptops out, feel free to search it, check me. First hit is this mess of a who cares, right? Which is really interesting because this is what people think about when they think about microservices, and that makes me hurt inside, right? Because the more people associate this to having robust, resilient, independently deploying services within their ecosystem, the more they're not going to do it, right? And so what I'm trying to do is really think about how do we make it feel safe and make it feel comfortable to have dependencies on other systems, to have really resilient interfaces, and to work with other teams. Is everyone familiar with the idea of Conway's Law, by the way? Yes, some yeses, one other yes. Conway's Law says that your technology system will tend to reflect the communication patterns of your organization. And so when we think about this, what that means is if I'm on a team and Marlene is on a team and we keep talking crap to each other, our application interfaces will reflect that, meaning if we get along really well, we'll have pretty resilient, well-integrated services. If we don't really talk and we're on silos across the building from each other, we'll tend to have fairly brittle integrations that tend to break a lot because we're not talking, which is really interesting and makes no logical A plus B sense, but we tend to see it reflected within our organizations. Which is why when I talk about this stuff, it's actually more than just tech. It's actually about getting you guys comfortable and getting you guys thinking about how do we expand into this space rather than just focusing on the little piece of code that we write. Okay, so with all these different teams working on different parts of the system, guess what happens when we all get into a room? It's definitely not my service. And if it is, I didn't make the change. I didn't push the code, right? So that causes lots and lots and lots and lots of problems, right? What happens is you get, I don't know if I gave you guys a chance to read the DEARs. Basically, the concept behind the DEARs is like, hey, you want to come out and hang with us? Because we'd really like to hang out. He's like, oh, buddy, my leg's broke. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to make it. I would just be like hanging in the back, and I'd be like, everyone would be targeting, and like, oh, that's great, because we won't be targeted, right? And it feels like sometimes it's in that dog-eat-dog kind of mentality that happens when projects are slipping as far as timelines, or we just start having really poor release processes, and that sucks, right? If you guys have ever looked at Patrick Lencioni, at Slalom we do Patrick Lencioni is getting naked, and it has nothing to do with what it sounds like, and it's all about being vulnerable and getting to know people and having very open and honest relationships and communication flows with people, right? And so 5 dysfunctions of a team basically says there are these steps that you need to take to really be a high-performing team. And kind of the number one within that is trust, right? So if we don't have trust, if we can't say, hey, my service is broke, I'm doing everything I can, we're going to need to delay our feature release cycle for a couple of weeks so that we can get our service back. We actually could patch it, but then it's going to keep breaking, and then we'd wind up pointing at other people again, right? Or we could fix it, but that's technical debt, and we actually need to get into our backlog, right? Or something, right? But being able to have those open, honest conversations, because guess what? If we can't tell other teams, we're probably not telling our leaders either, which sucks, because then it's not happening. That's just fun, because it's always fun to say, oh, I'm really, really, really humble, as long as we all admit that I'm the smartest guy in the room, right? And the idea is how do we pull back, right? How do we genuinely broker those trust type relationships? And that's what we're going to kind of talk about. All right, so we've talked a lot about these problems. They are complex, right? They're not simple solutions to these things, right? If you try to pack up a bicycle, that's what we're trying to give the example of. And it's not always easy to find where your problems lie. And so what we really are talking about here, if you want to hit the next slide, is we need to increase our visibility, right, into our systems. Because our systems are really complex, lots of changes happening all the time, releases happening all the time, and we need to increase our visibility into the system, even if it reflects some of the things that we need to fix ourselves, right? Okay, so talked a lot. We're going to get a little bit specific, and then we're going to go into our code and then into our demo. Fair? Okay, so what we're talking about is the full ecosystem that supports maybe a mobile app, right? If you have a mobile app, everyone can correct me here because, sorry, I'm trying to wander, and I'm occasionally walking in front of everybody all of the time. Everyone here literally probably has more mobile development than I do. I am not a developer as my first kind of line of defense, right? I'm primarily in the DevOps platform, public cloud type of space, right? But what I do is I support these things all the time. And what's funny is developers often think I'm really smart, not because I'm really smart, because I think about this problem so much that I can talk to them about microservices architecture. I can talk to them about shared services and caching and having more resilient interfaces and monitoring APIs. And those are the types of things that are really exciting to me. If we get into what's the code inside of the actual thing, then you guys are just going to talk circles around me, and I'll just shut up and let you guys talk, right? But the idea here is, and I've actually seen these types of models in a couple of our different customers, but if we have a primary app that maybe you have a couple of mobile apps calling into, right? You also have supporting services around that app, and then you also have dependencies that that app has to talk to, right? And this is actually fairly complex, right? Like I said, compared to those first websites where you maybe had a mobile app talking to an app, talking to a database. We used to talk about three-tiered apps all the time. It's just not 3 tiers anymore. Right? It's starting to get more and more into all these ancillary services. I mean, think about auth. If you have lots of different calls in from lots of different front ends, let's say you have a Roku device, let's say you have, you know, a mobile web page, and you have Xboxes, right? All those different interfaces, in addition to just Android and iOS, are all having to authenticate or all having to talk to your backend services. So thinking about building out shared services, it can be really scalable, really resilient, things that you don't have to have in your code. But then we also have to manage. How do we call out to them, and how do we maintain the health of that communication? All right, so what we're talking about here is we need to have health checks that don't just come from some external third-party service, right? I don't know how deeply you guys care about this stuff, but if you have an external third-party service calling out to your auth and search and content services that you depend upon, and they say they're green, it does not mean you're green, right? There's different traffic flows. It can be a network latency. It can be load balancers. It can be firewalls. All kinds of different weird, funky stuff that causes your call to fail and their call to be successful. Here's something else that's really interesting, right? Is that some third-party service, your ops team, defines this health check. Guess what? They don't know what your service needs in order to be up. If they do a ping, that just means the network interface sucks. If they just hit the /root or the /health and they get a 200 series response, cool, the service is technically running, but it might not have access to a database, which means you get a 404 not found in your response body, right, or whatever. The problem with that is we need to actually put the tools in the developer's hands, in you guys' hands, for your own services to be able to validate the health of your own service and your dependencies. And so that's what we're going to kind of talk about. Does that make sense so far? Okay. I hope that seems valuable, because Marlene is the brainchild that actually helps implement all of the things that I was talking about.
Is it demo time?
It's demo time.
Demo time.
We need to like confetti bombs or something, right? Like.
Demo time. Spoiler alert for next month's meetup. But so the last thing to talk about, we're gonna look at a really simple app that has a health check route. So oh, do I need that? Should I? Is it for the? It's not for the room, right? Okay. Having a hard time with this little. Is this okay? This is probably good. All right.
I'll click for you and you present.
Well, I have to code. Sorry for not standing up to really grab your attention, but I have to slap this keyboard here.
Actually do some hard stuff.
Yeah. So like I said, we're going to check out a really simple app to look at a health check route. Then we're going to take a look at the dependency, the service that it depends on. We're going to run them both locally, side by side in the terminal. We're going to take a look at that health route in the browser, and then we're going to run some tests to hit that health route in Postman. Then we're going to run them on the command line, and finally we're going to try to automate those through a cron job. So
one of the things that I want you guys to know is this is a very simple example, but what we really want to talk about is how we could extend that and really make it valuable to the teams.
yes.
Right? So every step we go, feel free to ask questions, and then we'll tend to try to chime in and drive out the fuller conversation.
So this is a really simple Flask app that we wrote. You can see down on line 10 that it's got a health check. So there's a route there defined called health. We're going to navigate to that in the browser later. And you can see right away on line 11, there's a to-do here because there are a lot of things that you can do to check the health of your app. Like we might want to add some code. If we were really going to build this out to be robust, we'd want to maybe check the response time of our hello route that we listed up on line 5.
So does anyone understand why the response time might be valuable from checking your own app from within your own container or your own service? What's really interesting is a lot of other services that are calling you, if you're just one step down, are tending to manage their response time to you. So guess what? If they're measuring their response time to you and back, now you've got to figure out where is that time coming from. Is it network? Is it load balancing? Is it any type of intermediate proxy or service? Is it your processing time, or is it the time of your dependencies calling back, right? That's where things kind of get complex, because if you have a mobile app calling into your web app, and they actually, and I might be using really bad terms when I say web app for the secondary tier, so I apologize. But if they say they're slow, right, because slowness is a really big deal to customers. Ricky, you probably have the statistics, but I think they said if a mobile app takes like something like 2 seconds from a response time perspective, they tend to remove it within 45 minutes or something like that and download an alternative app, which is crazy, right? And so response time is insane. And so you have the request from the mobile app to your service, AWS, data center, wherever. You're usually looking at a couple hundred milliseconds just on the network latency to your backend services. That has nothing to do with processing time. So you tend to have a very small window for actually processing, much less all your backend services. So the thing that I'm talking about here is if you have your mobile app that you can potentially get, or you have JavaScript within your web app, right, that can actually test what the latency is to the backend services, they can only see full response time. They can't see how long it takes once you get it. So this actually brings a lot of visibility to the overall conversation. Instead of saying something's broke and we don't know where, this helps you to start pinpointing. And as you start surfacing this information, and these are repeatable patterns, then everyone else can do the same thing, and now we can get real information. Okay, sorry.
No, that's a great addition. So on line 13, that's where we're checking the dependency to make sure that that's up as part of our health check. So on line 15, we are curling the dependency. We're going to spin it up at localhost 5000. That's where it's going to be running. So as long as that passes, then line 20 will execute. And in our browser, we're going to see the message that the website is up, and so is its dependency. But if there's an exception, then line 18 will execute, and we'll see a message that our app is up, but the dependency is down.
And because this is such a simple test, there's literally only a binary solution. Literally, the app has to be up in order to respond, right? Because we're not getting more granular information, we're not getting utilization of the service within the host, right? So if you have a Docker container, that might be valuable. We're not getting response times within the host, those types of things. We're only going to have 2 different possible solutions. Now, if you were doing this at a larger scale and you had 10 backend services that you wanted to monitor the health of, you would probably have something like a case statement, or you would have a couple of ifs, a couple of try catches that say, hey, go check this thing, return response for that one thing, and then continue down the list, right?
Yeah, you wouldn't want to build in, try and rescue blocks for like 10 different dependencies in the same method.
For every possible permutation.
It'd be horrible. There's just some modular refactoring to be done for a larger app. But for our use case, this is perfectly acceptable. And let's take a look at it. Oh, I've got
Are you guys familiar with Flask, by the way? It's super, super lightweight, kind of Python API endpoint. And so for mocking stuff out like this, it's really, really lightweight and easy.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with it before I built this, so it's pretty easy to get up and running.
You've done any Python as well, right?
Yes, that's true. Yes. So you can see on the left, I've got my app. And on the right, I've got my app dependency. And I'm going to fire them both up at the same time. But just to give you some insight into what kind of code's going to be running, I'm going to show you. So that's the code that we just looked at in that slide. It's exactly the same, except without the beautiful syntax highlighting. And over here, we've got the same thing, but much smaller for our dependency. This is the simplest thing we could spin up just to have something running. So like we said, we're going to go ahead and fire both of these up and then check them out in the browser. So I'm going to just tab back through. OK, Flask, run a host. And I'm going to actually run this one on port 5000 because that's where our health check will look for it. And
So that just says it's running on port 5000.
and we're going to fire this one up on port 3000. So if we open up the browser, not that one, we're going to navigate to localhost 3000/health, because that's the route that we defined for this health check. And we see my app, my website is up, and so is my dependency. Sorry, it's really small. You can probably see it just fine. Okay, so what happens, though, if we kill that?
Can I pause really
Go
quick?
for it.
So sorry. For those of you guys, is there anyone who hasn't really messed with API endpoints in general and maybe doesn't understand the code? It is simple, but it's worth explaining if you guys would potentially be implementing this in the future. So is it okay? Cool. Do you just want to talk about where the interfaces are that are actually being called and what code is actually executing, just from a logical perspective, and where they could add another route? Just because if they're doing mobile development, if they're doing, do you kind of see what I'm talking about?
No,
So-
you go for it.
So typically you'll have a default route, right, which is just like literally google.com, right? And so what we did is we wanted to be very explicit so everyone knew what we were doing. We just, instead of having a default route, we had a /health route. So this would be the equivalent of google.com/health, right? And so right now, because it's all local host would be the equivalent of your domain. So google.com/whatever. The port number, we're using a specific non like 80888443 port. If you were just using 80 or 443, then it just goes in your web browser. You never think about ports. Ports are more for if you're using multiple different services or endpoints on the same host, because they have to differentiate. Right? It's pretty simple. If you guys wanted to add another route, you would just add another route right here, make a different endpoint, and then when you called it from the browser, just like Marlena did, you would just use that different slash for your fully qualified domain name, right? Not just the domain, but the extension at the end. And so that's where you would be able to put anything you wanted. And so that's how, if you wanted to, and we'll talk about it later, if you wanted to do actual health of your network stack, if you wanted to do health of like your tier of services, because you have multiple instances of your service, if you wanted to push this into something like your Nginx load balancer that's actually doing service routing into your services, all of that could be handled in that type of fashion. If you haven't been doing a lot of APIs, sometimes it's helpful just to go over it.
Right, so because we spun up our app on port 3000, and then we navigate to localhost 3000/health, you can see that defined. Oh, I suppose I can just hover over it here. Yeah.
What's your terminal app you use again?
It's Tmux.
She is a rock
I'm
star.
happy to talk to you about it later.
Okay.
For sure, yeah.
She's got like an awesome RC file for it. Literally, like, she's a rock star at it. So.
Yes, my tools are better than I am. So we navigated to 3000/health, and that's what executes this logic. So we're hitting localhost 5000, and we spun that, well, we killed it, but before, when we spun it up over there, it curls. So you can see the request printing out in the terminal here, and it's giving us an HTTP status of 200, which means okay, like everything is okay. So now,
And you guys saw the response on the webpage when she called it? Yep.
so let's try it again. Oh, where did it go? Okay, so now we're going to refresh this. And now we see that the website's up, but the dependency's down. And that's what we expected, because when we tried to curl 5000, nothing's running there. So we get that message. We caught the exception.
And just to be clear, when we called it, right, you can see that it actually created the secondary calls to the dependency service to validate when it was up previously.
Uh-huh.
Right? And so we never called the dependency service. That was all calling it through the S/.
Right, right. So let's start it back up. And so this is all well and good. Like, obviously, we figured out a way to check whether or not our service is up, but it's not like you're going to sit here and execute this command from the command line like every 10 minutes or just after something's broken. So, you know, in the spirit of this talk, we want to talk about setting this up in a more automated fashion. So maybe the next step is to get some tests going and have some kind of test that checks this and hits the health route. So we can use Postman for that. So Postman is pretty straightforward. Over here we have what's called a collection, and we just have one GET request specified. And that GET request is hitting localhost 3000/health. So just like we did in the command line, we're hitting it here. So we have one pretty basic test that just says, I expect this to have a status of OK. And we saw that 200 status come back when we loaded the page in the browser. And we're also checking for that string to say, my website is up, and so is my dependency. So we can just come over here and Postman.
This part is actually kind of interesting because some of our clients, what we've actually seen is that backend services, if you send a request to them and they don't have the information because their connection to their database is down or whatever, turn a 200 series response saying, error. Yeah. But, and so parsing that the body of your response can be a big deal, right? Or at least valuable, right?
So we can run this, and we see that the response is OK and that the body matches the string. But what happens if we kill that service and we run that test again? Boom, it failed because we actually got the message, my website is up, but its dependency is down. So that's also cool. You look like you want to say something.
I was just going to say So now we have a testing framework, right? So first we showed, hey, we can do a thing. Now we have a testing framework for validating the actual response codes and the actual value that's coming back to us.
So the cool thing is we don't have to sit in this like IDE thing for Postman and click the send button all the time. That's not, I mean, it looks better, but it's not that much more fun. So you can actually export your collections. There's a button for it if I can find it. So we have the collection. Again, that's just this one test file here that's in there, but we can export it. And when we click on that, we get a JSON file. And so I've actually saved that here. It's this JSON file, ownyourinnocence.postmancollection.json. So Postman has a command line tool called Newman that you can use to execute tests. So if I do Newman run, it's horrible. It's a horrible looking. I'm going to actually show it to you on GitHub. So also this demo, the source code's up on GitHub, and we'll show you a link for that.
You guys notice it's in her repo. You know why? She did it.
It's true. I know. I know. I think it's fine. But anyway, yeah, it's some horrible looking JSON.
Basically, you would typically never write this.
Yeah, this was auto-generated when I hit export. So anyway, ignoring my password vulnerabilities, go for it.
Can I make it a quick exception? You can actually generate these tests from Swagger.
Yeah,
and then edit the JSON directly to put in the result that you want. That's the one time you would edit it.
So that's one thing that we were going to talk about. The nice thing about using it is absolutely being able to use it against Swagger. One thing I would slightly tune on that is I would tend to be thinking about how to automate it so that you're continuously validating your Swagger doc against your API, but also allowing for people to update their API as long as they're versioning. You might send out a flag and say, hey, their API did change as long as they versioned it, right, or something.
All right, I'm going to run my tests with Newman. All right, I got the failure I expected because this service wasn't running. Let me fire my service back up, and I'll go over into another. Yeah, let's all talk about tmux later and how much I love it and how much I can't remember this Newman. Never mind. Get out of there. Okay, Newman run. What was it? Oh, something. Great. Oh, what happened? Oh, I did get a.
You don't have a directory.
I am, right. It has to be able to find that app.py file. Thanks, everyone. This is what happens when you don't pay attention. There, now it's great. Now it's really good. Okay, but I'm still not going to sit here and run this Newman command all of the time, so what can I do?
I don't know. What can you do?
I can use a cron job. I can use a cron job. Let me show it to you. I'm going to print out my little cron job here that I wrote. So you can see down here, cron is, can everyone see that? Is it too, let's get, okay. All right, here it is. Please ignore my hackish path specification thing. I was having some trouble actually finding Newman I should show you my, hang on, let's backtrack a minute. let me show you the bash script that I wrote first, because cron, you want to call some kind of a script. So let's look at that. Run.
You guys are familiar with cron, right? Having a scheduled time to run a thing.
We'll talk about it more in a second. But first, let's start here. So I wrote a bash script that executes the Newman command. So this, I'm telling it where to look for my Postman collection, and then I'm sending it into a logs directory. I'm giving it a timestamp so that each time I run this, I'm going to have a file in the logs directory that captures that Newman output. So when I run it, let's see what's in logs right now. There's a lot of stuff because it's been running every minute. I'm going to just get in there really quick, and I'm going to delete everything. And I'm going to go back, and now I'm going to run my tests, and then I'm going to look at my logs, and see now there's a little Postman thing in there. We can look at it, and it's the same thing. So that just printed to a little file that I can look at. So now we can use a cron job to call that. So here I'm just calling my bash script. So cron will run that every minute, and that's why when we looked in the logs a second ago, there were so many of them, because this has been running every minute for a couple of hours. So now I have this automated way to every minute hit the health check and make sure that everything's running correctly.
Sorry, I'm OCD, so the syntaxy stuff, if you guys aren't familiar with it.
Oh yeah, I forgot to talk about the time. So for cron, you might be wondering what these asterisks are about. And so cron's time-based, right? Like you're saying, please run every some amount of time. So it's minute, hour, day, month, year. So the asterisk means every. So we're saying every minute of every hour of every day of every year.
Every month of every year.
Every month of every year. Thanks. I knew I forgot something. Run it. So there's, you would put some numerical value in there if you wanted to do it like every 15 minutes or on the 1st of April every year or what have you.
No, that's perfect.
And then
cron is
you put the
super
command to
simple. You
execute
just
there.
put your period, how often, right?
Mhm.
And then the path to whatever you want to run, and then it does it.
Mhm.
And so if you want to show the logs file again, I don't know if it's been more than a minute.
There's 2 now.
Yeah, so every minute it's going up there, hitting it, and verifying that it's up.
Let's kill this service, and then it'll keep getting logs, and we can look later at all the broken ones. So that's really cool and all, but how useful is it? There's probably some next steps we want to take. Like, instead of having to go in and look at these log files and cat them to see what the results were, I probably want, some better monitoring than that. Let me get back into presentation mode. Okay. So next steps.
Cool. So now it's like, what are all the other things, right? And this is just, this is a tiny little stab into a big problem, right? But if you were to start thinking about putting this into your app, where could you go from here, right? Well, you could actually put it into your monitoring tool. So you could output your logs, send it to Elk, send it to Splunk. Once it's in Elk or Splunk, you could then alert on it. You could then event on it. You could say, hey, send everyone an email every time my backend service is down or anytime I'm down, right? So then you can start having people not only being able to query it in a dashboard or something in Splunk, but also getting alerts real time whenever anything is down, right? Or even slow, because some of the things that's even worse than down is when it's just, it's like intermittent faults, right? So it drops 1 in every 30, right? And it causes potentially cascading issues where you get slowness and everything else. You can do things like chat ops. So if you alert this into I keep wanting to say HipChat, but HipChat is nothing anymore. Slack, Teams, what have you. So you can output anytime you get an event into your chat service, right? And you can actually create a chatbot that you can say, hey, my service is sick, and it's this node potentially within your pool if you have 15 of these running. You can say, hey, you know what, just kill that service because you already have a policy that says always maintain 15 of my container, right? So you guys only got every other word in our entire presentation because we keep handing the microphone back and forth. You guys should all listen to the video and tell me how bad it is.
In case it wasn't good enough the first time.
Give me a thumbs down on YouTube.
Oh, okay, I appreciate it. Chatbots are actually super simple. So I've actually been seeing more and more trends that Python of kind of being a glue type language that is just really good at hooking things together. And so there's a lot of chatbots that you can write in Python that are really simple, right? So you say, hey, kill that container that's kind of acting sick, and then it just redeploys. Now it'd be great to kind of continue to think about next time. Maybe we look at our code. Do we have a memory leak or whatever because we're having to restart every so often, but at least there's a starting point, right? And so once you start being able to act on it, then you can start to think about self-healing. You can start thinking about more things. I don't know how deep you guys go, but we've traced ghost issues where dev teams have spent weeks of firefighting only to find out that it was actually a networking issue or an underlying host utilization issue, which really, really, really sucks. So if it is a code issue, you want to know. If it's not a code issue, you also want to know, right? Which would be really cool. And that's a lot of stuff that you can implement in exactly the same way. Do you guys have any questions, guys? Because we covered a lot of content. We are still hiring. Feel free to send me an email if you have any. Yes, sir, Ricky.
Since you use Postman, what do you think about Postman monitoring?
Postman monitoring's cool. I have not seen a lot of Postman monitoring implemented at customer sites. Our trend and default approach tends to be let's use open source type tooling that they can get enterprise licensing on for if they want to. But I can do more work and create more value if I don't have to wait for like a procurement cycle to say, oh yeah, we'll give you $10,000 for Postman monitoring or something. Yes, ma'am?
What was the tool that you used to write tests in Postman?
It's just Postman.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I'll show it to you again. Let me, technical difficulties. Yeah, I just downloaded Postman. I'd actually never worked with Postman before, or a computer at all.
You're not presenting, by the way. Or there you go.
Well, I just,
Nope, you're fine.
okay. Postman. I am okay, but I'm having a hard time. Okay. Yeah, so it's just Postman. Like, I tinkered with this for like a day, so I'm certainly not an expert. I did look into Postman monitoring actually, and I couldn't figure out how to get it to just run the tests as opposed to like some other content you'd probably include in Postman, which is why I didn't end up using that. Instead, I just
You should click on monitor collection.
I did, and it didn't run the tests actually. Let's talk about it later.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is just Postman. I just installed Postman, and then there was a demo like how to automate tests. So I followed that, and it told me to just make a little GET request and then go to the little tests tab over here and write a couple tests.
Can you show your README from your Git repo also?
I can. So that slide has a little link to my repo. I'm gonna click it, please. Actually, just.
Command click?
Thank you. I don't know how to, no, that's not working either.
No, just try all the buttons on the bottom.
All right, let's just, I think I had it open. Okay, so I wrote this really nice README because I'm very good at writing documentation. And so when you get here to this repository, you're gonna have a very easy time clicking through and reading about Flask and requests and Newman, getting set up to run this thing, and then Postman and cron. It's gonna be great for you. Very
I told you she was a rock star.
really straightforward.
Yes, sir.
So I talked briefly about using Swagger.
Mhm.
You mentioned how to kind of handle some of the versioning issues with the API via that.
Yeah, so that's actually an interesting use case, is that you can absolutely parse Swagger docs and then test against them using Postman. The thing that we have seen to be valuable at our customers is to not stop there, right? Because the problem is what that does is it actually creates an enforcement policy that your devs tend to update their Swagger docs when their API changes, but they don't update the organization when their API changes, right? And they're not versioning. So doing more than just that, first validating that your Swagger doc accurately reflects your API, and then secondarily, we talked about this a little bit, actually storing that Swagger document and versioning it within a repo, whether it's a Mongo database or whatever, right? So that you can do a diff against it and see if there are any changes. Because if there are changes and they're not versioning it, that's also a problem, because even though the Swagger doc's valid, it'll still break things.
So we're hiring.
We are hiring.
You can email Jesse about that if you want. Megan is here.
Megan's also our
talented
hiring
talent
rock
person.
star.
This is my third day at Slalom, so if you have any questions about what onboarding is like, I'm happy to
And she knows everything about Solemn in 3 days. Because
Yeah,
she's gone through all of the onboarding processes, watched all the videos.
Yeah, so I had a question. When you're
Yes.
Saying that this dependency is down.
Mhm.
What are some of the best ways to measure dependencies if dependencies are down inside of your system? Because
Yeah.
if I'm calling one thing and it's up, but its dependencies are down, or like if there's like a daisy to it, I've been in places where it's like a daisy chain of dependencies, and like how do you make it so that's manageable in your?
No, that's perfect. Can you go back to the system drawing diagram? Yep. So the idea here is actually that to you, it's your app, but to everyone else, it's their app also, right? And so the idea is we start to talk about kind of influence and transformation within an organization. What we tend to see is that if you try to tell everyone to do all the things all the time and give them a big long checklist of this is what it takes to become DevOps, it actually is not successful, right? But if you can be really pragmatic and really focused and allow teams the freedom to experiment and say, hey, we have a problem with this particular issue, either resiliency or visibility or being able to deploy more quickly or stable environments or whatever, right? Give them a little bit of flexibility and let them try things out. Then we start talking about spheres of influence. So the goal here in this particular situation would be you guys, who's the team here who manages this app, right? You guys define health checks to all of your services and all of your dependent services. And what that does is highlight when this thing's down. It doesn't highlight why it's down. And in order to find out why it's down, they would do the same thing for their app. So then they would have a /health route for their app, which would be specifically custom to the exact type of endpoint requirements that they have. And so what we didn't necessarily get into very much, and we talked about it a little bit, but a 200 series request, just like it's not very valuable to you, you don't actually know what type of response they need for their dependencies. So the idea is to start highlighting, hey, we're seeing that your service tends to be down, and that can actually be masked a lot in some of our customers, because it's really nice to build resilient interfaces and do things like caching. Guess what caching does? It means if your backend service is down for 2 or 3 minutes, no one even knows. But as soon as it's down for 3 minutes and 1 second, everybody knows, right, or whatever. And so the idea is to still check that endpoint, even though you're building resiliency into your system. And then highlighting to them and even sharing, hey, this is where we were really successful, and we can imagine it being really successful for you guys so that they're not getting fingers pointed at them.
This is a larger level of coordination across multiple teams to make sure that everyone's kind of marching to the same kind of health monitoring standards.
The only small thing I would say is I'm extremely pragmatic. I tend to not say everyone needs to do all of the things all the time. What I tend to say is if we have a problem where people are pointing at us and we don't know if it's our code or not, I want to get better visibility into my code. If that then shows that it is a problem with my service, cool, I want to fix it. If it shows me that there's a problem with one of my backend services, I want to highlight that and give them I'm going to share with them the tools so that they can fix it. But if these guys are super robust and reliable, they might have focused in other areas. They might know their code really well. They might know their dependencies really well. They don't have a lot of them. A health route, I would tend to not mandate that. I would tend to share it where it's needed. Does that make sense? Okay. Every time she pulls up this slide, I just feel like she's saying, just in case you forgot, we're still hiring. Which is awesome, and I love it. Yes. We have cookies. You guys got that?
If you want to pull that code and run it for yourself, you sure can. You just have to remember my name. It's Marlena. And the name of this talk.
Do we post the decks?
Yep, we posted it. Yeah, if you send me the deck, we'll get it posted, and then also this talk will be available.
Cool.
So they'll be able to see this.
Awesome.
And the recording will be
Oh, yeah. I mean, just for fun, like we can show you. Like if you guys got bored, we could like talk to you about a lot of other DevOpsy type stuff. That's like, this is where some of the Own Your Innocence comes from. No, I just find myself doing it a lot. Like if anyone stops talking, I feel like, oh, someone should be talking. So I'm like, all right, thank you guys so much. You guys are awesome. And definitely give a big round to Marlena.
I'll just talk. So thank you all for coming. Hopefully you got something great out of this presentation. Again, we are doing like the Flask bits of this and are curious to learn a little bit more about Python and Flask and building APIs. We're going to be doing that next time in kind of a full-blown talk. Outside of that, you guys are free to just kind of hang out, have pizza. There is just one more bit of business here. This is Ricky's last Denver Modern Web. And he has been amazingly helpful for setting this up and good faith. get drunk about it.
Ricky loves bourbon, and so we're giving this a go. And a thank you from all of us at Marweb for helping us with everything from the streaming to doing talks to helping do all the things that you do with us. So thank you so much. And for those who you may or may not know, Ricky is going on what I like to call his walkabout. Which trail is it again?
I'm gonna go walk from Mexico to Canada and hopefully not get jumped by a bear.
Yes,
Wow.
exactly. There it is.
In like 6 months.
In like 6 months. So he's
I'll
taking
take about
a
6
leave of absence for a while from us, so he'll be back in September?
Ish.
Ish? Well, I don't know. Whenever he finishes the trail
We'll figure it out
or
when
gets
it's
hit
done.
by a mountain lion, whatever comes first.
Yeah.
So thank you so much again, Ricky.
thank you.
Yeah. So again, feel free to have beer and pizza. I'll be here if you want to know more about Solemn or any of these fine folks, and if you want to know more about any of the stuff we talked about, come and just talk to us. We're here. All right. Thanks.
The cool thing that I didn't actually say, like we said it a little bit, like Marlena hasn't used almost any of those tools, like Python, Flask, Postman, any of that stuff. A, she stood up and it was awesome. B, you're very accessible, right?
You nailed it. You badass, you.